Dean Nelson is tonight's facilitator. He's Director of Network of Politically Active Christians and Acting President of Global Outreach Campus Ministries. Global Outreach reaches a multi-ethnic group of students at campuses up and down the East Coast and equips them through various programming and through discipleship. As Executive Director of Impact, Dean aims to teach, train, and activate Christians to be more involved in the political process. He and his wife, Julia Nelson, who is on the panel tonight, they have 3 beautiful homeschool children who are just brilliant. They seem to have busier schedules than I do. I've had the pleasure actually to work with Dean over a good part of this year, and it's really been awesome. He's a great man of God. He's been a mentor to me and so many others, and I just thank God for his surrender to his will. So without ado, I will present to you Pastor Dean Nelson.
The documentary opens by discussing a little bit about slavery coming to an end. And as we see slavery in America coming to an end is where you begin to see the rise of what we call the eugenics movement, which is kind of a social pseudoscience that basically seeks to eliminate a particular group of people.
Actually, I did not know that people even could think up things, actually like spend their life, just manipulating and coming up with plans to take out an entire race in such a hateful way. It's just another hurtful thing.
What you began to see is those who actually made money during the slave trade now saw blacks, slaves, no longer as property that could be owned, but now they were competition for workers, competition for resources. That's how they saw them. And so it began a whole entire shift of mindset, sometimes even using the Bible, sometimes using pseudoscience like eugenics to say that blacks were inferior stock.
I have noticed that Planned Parenthood is in African American communities or Hispanic communities here on the East Coast.
When you look at the N-word, how we've embraced that word, we say it's fashionable to say it among ourselves. And yet, if a white person says it to us, we're very offended. The abortion is pretty much the same situation. We made something fashionable in our communities, and yet its whole intent is to get rid of us.
There were a number of efforts, some to take blacks back to Africa, so that you guys may be aware of, but other efforts to actually begin to limit the population of blacks as well as kill blacks off.
It's a crime against us, and these are God-given gifts, that these children are supposed to be here, are meant to be here. And the saddest thing is that we really have to somehow get the message to each other.
People need to know why, what the agenda is behind the abortion clinics.
The second chapter begins to talk about some of the different leaders that were aligned with Hitler and others in what they called a eugenics movement, where they actually not only exterminated African Americans in this country, but also in Germany and other places.
What you need to do is be willing to go out there and communicate a message and say, why is it that we continue to embrace something that was designed from the very beginning to eradicate us? I mean, that's the challenge that we have. And again, it's not a Democrat or Republican Party. It's an issue of it was to eradicate us as people of color.
If you look at the consistent tactic of marketing government control as government services, the government's coming to help. But when the government comes to help you with your housing, the government gets to decide what kind of house you're going to live in. And when the government comes to help with education, they get to decide what your kids learn in school. And the same kind of thing with these things that were marketed as health services is that it was marketed, that we're coming to help you, but really we want to decide who's going to have babies and who's not going to have babies.
If you were going in and you needed help for welfare, whatever it was, and they said they would give you welfare if you had a forced sterilization, what would you think then?
Not being educated and them targeting me because I'm not educated, I would definitely choose the welfare and get the sterilization because I had no idea.
It really calls into question for each one of us on how we assess these organizations. And why is it that we continue to be okay with something that we know from a historical standpoint, which is laid out eloquently in this documentary, from eugenics to birth control review boards, to sterilization, to Planned Parenthood. its whole focus has been about people of color. Why is it that we continue to embrace that? That in and of itself should be a big enough argument for the average person. Again, looking at the comparison of what is going on with the N-word, what is going on with the saggy pants. I mean, you take all of those things and ask yourself, what is the intent?
I saw the way they marketed it within the African American communities. How do we market our side?
We really have to somehow get the message to each other, and in a believable way. And I think one of the ways to do that are people like you, are young people to get out there and talk to. I think a lot of the younger people get it.
Take this message and just let 5 other people know. Because I think that for way too long, when we talk about, particularly quote-unquote abortion, the debate has been framed the way that they wanted us to, that it's a woman's right to choose. But it hasn't been framed in the context of, well, we have, as Planned Parenthood, we're $1 billion a year organization with $1 billion of assets that gets over almost $600 million. What's like, was it $350 million a year from the federal government? I'm trying to think of what most communities could use instead of getting that money to the largest abortion provider, in America. What could that money be used for?
When I first turned 18, I was just eager to vote, and now I'm kind of regretting that, I have a president that's the same color as I am, who is pro-choice. And a question I had was, before you go into picking who you should choose in your decision-making on voting, where do you, find this information before, you jump into it? And how do you actually feel about our president now?
You've got to decide on what you stand for, whether your moral values line up with where that person's position is, and let that decide for you who you're going to support. And as long as you can go to sleep at night and rest comfortable with the decision that you make, that's all you have to be happy. But it's got to be more than this. Because at the end of the day, this is just a shell. That's all this is a shell. We all bleed the same way, and we all need each other.
A group of students about a month ago went with me to meet with every Congressional Black Caucus member, because as it was seen with Reverend Jesse Jackson, as was also seen with the NAACP, something happened in the mid to late 70s, and that is that you basically had the Congressional Black Caucus that used to be very vocal in opposition to this because they saw what was happening. Why all of a sudden did they become silent? When we went to every one of those members' offices, they all get, the lowest one, I think, gets a 90% rating from Planned Parenthood, but the vast majority get a 100% rating. And if you look at where they get their funding for their campaigns, and you look at some of their donors, they're the same people that support Planned Parenthood. And I think that if there's anybody that should take a responsibility and interest, it should be the Congressional Black Caucus. My point with that is that for us not to support any, regardless of which party, but not to support any candidate at the state level or at the federal level that is willing to push this genocide mandate.
There's just some things that are right. And we've got to start willing to have those conversations in our communities.
It shed a lot of light on issues that no one has any idea about.
You've got to do some things different. You've got to decide that the elected officials who pass legislation have to be held accountable.
I think that a baby should have the same chances as a grown person should, that they should live life, and should nobody kill no baby just for the mistakes that a young person made.